Fergus, thank you for putting your time aside and hosting this tasting that we're going to have with Hush Heath today. There's so many wines that you've got, and I can't wait, particularly as we're going to split this into 2 videos. Just so everybody knows more about you and the history of the brand, fill us in on yourself and Hush Heath.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having us. I mean, yeah, always a pleasure to come and talk about our ever-growing selection of wines. I'll start with a sort of positive history of Hush Heath and who we are and where we're hoping to go and where we're going. So our vineyards were planted by Richard Balfour who's still owns the business now, and they were planted in 2002. It was originally a block of about 8 acres, split between Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and Pinot Meunier, and it's quite an interesting block. There's a slightly apocryphal story that he planted it purely so that if he looked out of his bedroom window, he'd be able to see the vines and enjoy the view. I'm not quite sure how true that is. It is a little bit further away from the house than you'd expect. But beautiful site, actually. And we're really lucky here. So Hush Heath has a very strange microclimate. It's a 400-acre estate. It's a 400-acre estate, of which around 100 acres, give or take, are planted up vineyard. The rest is used for orchard. We also have quite a lot of ancient oak woodland and wildflower meadows. So it's quite a diverse estate. All on Tunbridge Wells clay, which is a good growing medium for grapes. And so, the original vineyard was planted in 2002, and the first harvest actually came up in 2004. And they made the wines were made by my father, Owen Elias, at Capel Down, where he was the head winemaker at the time. And the first wine to come out was the Balfour Brut Rosé in 2004, which Richard, rather tongue-in-cheek, but with his tongue rather in his cheek, entered into the IWSC, where it promptly won a trophy for best sparkling rosé. And it was the first time an English wine won that particular trophy. It was quite, I think the omens were good for English wine and specifically for his site. And on the back of that, we've just grown and grown and grown. We put our winery in 2010, and the idea when we first put the winery was that we would make around about 30,000 bottles a year. 99% of that would be this Balfour Brut Rosé, which we still make every year. It's our flagship wine. And then the rest would, you'd have very occasional, very rare, one-off releases of Blanc de Blanc or something like that. And since then, we've grown and grown and grown. In 2014, we were making about 130,000 bottles, of which 80% was sparkling, 20% was still. And then in 2018 and 2019, we grew to around about 400,000 bottles. We're around about 70% sparklings and 30% still, although that percentage is growing and changing. So more and more we're finding ourselves making more and more still wines. And I definitely think the trend here is towards probably a 60-40 split on still and sparkling production. Quite exciting. I think English still wine has massive potential, as do our sites. And so now quite encouraging times. We still make Balfour Brut Rosé, but we now probably, I'm not sure, but I mean, we make 26 or 27 different wines every year. So we've got one of the most diverse portfolios in English wine. If not, I can only think of Capel Down as a producer who make more wines than us. Obviously, there are lots of people who make more bottles than us, but more wines specifically. So yes, it's a complicated place, but really exciting place as well. Fun. So that's sort of a positive history of Hush Heath.
It's a part of history. As you said, I mean, that's a lot. Hearing you talk about the wine, there's a lot going on there. So, speaking of which, where would you like to start for the tasting?
I think it's worth starting on the Red Miller. So the majority of the wines we're going to taste today come out of our Winemakers collection, which we launched in 2019. And the idea of these wines is they are unique. They're not necessarily all small production, although most of them are. But they're all unique in the English wine landscape, or at least interesting in the English wine landscape. So the Red Miller is 100% Pinot Meunier. It's red wine made out of Pinot Meunier, which in itself is quite rare. I know it's done in parts of America, but I've only come across about 6 wines in my career that are red Pinot Meunier. And so we use Pinot Meunier as a blending proportion for sparkling paints, or you might use it for a sort of a Blanc de Noir base. You might use it as is. But yeah, never for still. Well, very rarely for still wine, and never for red. But this block came in right at the end of the 2018 harvest, and it was this incredibly, unbelievably ripe for Pinot Meunier. We had a potential alcohol of just shy of 12%, which you never see. A TA of about, I think it was 8.1 or something like that. Very low TA, very high pH. It screamed still wine. It screamed red wine. If it was Pinot Noir, I would have been very happy and think, oh well, that's a lovely part of my Luke's Pinot Noir blend. But it was Pinot Meunier. So it was bizarre. So it was my father's idea. He still works here, so we've got quite a strange dynamic here. It works very well for us, though. So my father's the consultant winemaker, and I'm the head winemaker. So we both sort of feed into the blends, and often we'll find there are wines where one or other takes a sort of takes control over a certain blend or a direction of a wine, and that becomes their baby. And with the Winemakers collection, this is very much Dad's wine. And it was his idea. And the plan was, if it didn't work, we thought we'd crush and destem it and ferment it on skin to see what it looked like. And if it didn't work, we'd just blend it away and lose it in a sparkling rosé and hope no one realised. But it was, it was born out of sheer, what's the word I'm looking for? It was sheer inquisitiveness. We just wanted to know what it would be like and where it could go. So crushed it, destemmed it, fermented it 7 days on skin. It's very quick ferment, quite hot, sort of late, mid-20s, so 24, 25, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
Then combination of French and American barrels. Again, not much oak, although they were brand new barrels, so it's slightly different. And then we let it sit till sort of May, when we wrapped, salted, and bottled in June. Quite an exciting wine, and it's then gone on and proven to be the sort of star of its cohort. So we released 4 wines that year into the Winemakers collection. So there was this one, this Sceptre Dial, which we're trying later on, the Victoria Ash Blanc de Blanc, and the Late Harvest. And of all of them, this one has just far surpassed anything. We're really proud of it. It's a really phenomenal wine.
I mean, we were speaking about it just at the start, how difficult it can be to make an English red wine that has body, that has depth, and and a lot of complexity. Because with a majority of the wines in the old world wine regions, particularly within Europe, there's a lot going on there. I mean, they're different grape varieties. They're very strong and bold. Now, I wouldn't necessarily say that this is a question of it competing, but I think it stands up, particularly for a cool climate. It'd be nice to pair it off, rather try it against some New Zealand Pinots, another cool climate region, just to get a good balance. But it's surprising how much is going on there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's what really excites me about it. It's a bit like when I first tasted it, and what's been amazing is cracking it up against the Luke's Pinot Noir. So we make Luke's Pinot Noir every year, and that's our, not every year, but most years, that's our sort of house red wine. It's delicious, one of my favourite wines to make. But track it, they happen to be in the same tanks, or tanks next door to each other. And tasting the two side by side happened more often than not. And what was incredible was the speed at which the Red Miller developed. It was tasting like old world Oregon Pinot within about 6 months. It was bizarre. Not but New World Oregon Pinot. It was, and it's the same since it's been in bottle. Its development's been the same. It's streaked ahead, but then it's reached a wonderful plateau at the moment. It's tasting phenomenal at the moment, doing really well. It was also very well rewarded at the IWC, so it picked up a gold medal at the IWC, which is the first time an English Red's won one. And then it went on and won a trophy subsequently. So they do that. The IWC, they do 2 tranches of tastings, and then you get from those tranches, they award the medals, and then they taste the gold medal winners again after the second tranche to see who gets a trophy. And we won. We picked up a trophy for best new release wine, which is really, really exciting. Again, knowing which wine is at the moment. So it's a real trailblazer. And we're really proud of it.
It's quite interesting how light it is in colour. I mean, from what I can make out, it's really, you can see through it. Which the reason why I'm pointing this out is because normally, with a red wine, it would be almost too weak, should we say? But this doesn't have that, particularly on the palate. There's a lot going on there, which surprises me. Again, looking at how clear the red wine is. Sorry, excuse me. Again, I think it just goes back to what a great job you guys have done.
Yeah, no, we're really proud of it. And it's just delicious. Very cool. Well, Dad drinks it with grouse. That's his go-to pairing: well-hung grouse and red Miller. And he's absolutely right. It is delicious. It's a really phenomenal wine, and it's a wine which we'll probably never make again. It's, we've had ripe years since then. 2019, yes, 2019 were very ripe. 2020 was a very low yielding year, but the quality was incredible. I didn't see any Pinot Meunier that comes close to what we used to make this. So it really is a once in a generation wine for us. We're quite chuffed.
So are you suggesting that it may not come about again?
Well, never say never, but also that it sort of goes against the premise of our winemakers collection. The idea is we can be a bit lazy. We need to think of something new, and that's sort of what we're trying to drive at. This idea that the wines always need to have a new edge or a new style. Whether we'd make a red Pinot Meunier, if we got the chance, but I don't think it would go into the winemakers collection. Then it would become a product in its own right. But yeah, you need to find any Meunier that stands up.
Well, what you said, I mean, what I find, and I'm very grateful you did, because it's a lovely red wine, and it's great to have the opportunity to experience English red wines, because it's, I've said many times, it's less likely that you'll find a good one. So I'm pleased you went down that road with it.
That was a fun one, and just a real hoop to make as well. I think that's the best bit about working here, and particularly with wines like these. They're fun to make. It's really enjoyable, working on wines like these. It's sometimes we obviously we make 400,000 bottles a year, so obviously some of the blends are big, 25,000 litre, 50,000 litre blends, and they're also very interesting to do. But when you get these little projects, and you're just like, wow, that's really cool. Just building that, that's it. Yeah, that's the one. that's why you do it.
That's a good way of adding excitement. Sorry, Karen.
No. That was all I was going to say.
Well, it's a good way of adding excitement and extra interest to the wines that you make, because these are unique. They're not always going to be around, as you've been saying. And with this particular wine, it just worked, and you went for it. So yeah, it's great to be able to experience it. I'm pleased you did it.
Yeah, no, I'm chuffed with it, and yeah, like you said, it's almost all gone now, which is it's quite poignant. It's quite sad. It'll all be gone, and then who knows what comes next. But anyway, yeah, so that's Red Miller. Would you like to move on? Should we go to?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, what would you like to go to next?
If we go to the Scepter Dial, so that's this one, which is the 7 on it.
So whilst we're on that, quickly, can you talk just a little bit about the labels? Because we've seen the Red Miller and you've just shown us the next one. Can you mention those?
Absolutely. So with part of the philosophy here at Hush Heath is this idea of mixing wine and art. So Richard and Leslie in particular, are very avid art collectors. And whilst our cellar doesn't quite match up to Pommery in its collection, we do have quite a lot of artwork here. And we wanted to reflect that in some way in the wine. So for the Winemakers collection, each incarnation will have a different artist. So the first incarnation, which is what the Red Miller and the Scepter Dial come from, we used an artist called Coventry, who's quite famous, Birmingham-born artist. He did an amazing series of artworks called Junk, which basically were he took close-ups of the McDonald's logo angles and then sort of painted it onto these huge canvases. We've got a couple of them down here in the cellar door. And when you come, I'll show you them. They're phenomenal pieces. And so we approached him first and said, would you mind awfully producing something for us to put on our bottles? And he sent over these ideas, and they were incredible. And they were just perfect to start it off. And so that's what he did, the first ones. And then the second set, which we'll be tasting later on, were painted by a German artist called Lothar Gutz, who's awesome. He came down when we were just labeling up and just finishing off the bottles, and he's just a really lovely German guy. Just appeared, just came. He came to lunch, and he was awesome, but just beautiful again. Really quite abstract, all about big blocks of colour, and it's just really exciting. And I love that side of it. It's getting that. It makes the wines stand out. It's not particularly good branding for Hush Heath, because at no stage on those front labels does it say Balfour or anything about the vineyard or even anything about the winemakers. It's literally just the artist's work and his signature. But they look incredible, and I love them. And they're just perfect statement pieces. Yeah.
So tell me more about the wine then.
So this one is actually mine, and this was one of the first wines I made as a winemaker. So I was the assistant winemaker in 2018, and this is made from the 7 grape varieties of Champagne. So it's predominantly Chardonnay, but it's also got Pinot Noir, Pinot Meunier, and Pinot Blanc, and then it's got some Arbane, some Petit Meslier, and some Pinot Gris. So it's a real mashup.
Certainly is.
The idea was it was like, I didn't really know where to go with it, so I started. Pinot Gris came in first, so I started that off, and actually it became a sequential inoculation. So I had Pinot Gris fermenting for about 5 days before the next grape variety came in, which was Pinot Noir. And what we did was I just very gradually built up I'd sort of ferment going, and then I'd inoculate with a new yeast. And then, so we actually ended up using 9 different yeasts to make this wine. It then spent about 3 months on fermentation, and then I used some bassinage, in-tank bassinage, to mix the lees in the tank, which gives it this incredible sort of custard apple sort of characteristic. Or there was a fabulous one from a sommelier. He called it apricot yogurt. And it's got this incredible yogurty, leesy texture to it, and this wonderful. And then then coupled with this sort of slightly sort of almost Granny Smith, but not quite Granny Smith acidity and bite. It's bizarre, but it's a phenomenal wine. I absolutely adore this, and it's like, and it's my favourite line. We had Hugh Johnson here. He tried it, and it said it's very good, which was lovely. He said it's like all good Burgundies. It has to be served at exactly the right temperature, because Richard has the horrible tendency of chilling everything to buggery. So it's always far too cold when we have a tasting. But if you get it at just the right temperature, around about 12 degrees, it's phenomenal. And it's so complex. And I mean, that's what you'd expect. 7 varieties and all the sitting around we did with it. But it's this incredibly complex and compelling wine that's, a pleasure to drink. It works amazingly with sort of like pork and things like that. Just really cool.
There's definitely a lot going on now. I mean, obviously hearing you speak about it, but you can pick it up in the palate. Very beautiful texture, lots of different fruits are coming through. But I think, what you mentioned about with Hugh, and then the quote that you just gave, forgive me, it's just escaped me, but it sums it up perfectly. It's a wonderfully complex white wine that is subtly balanced, is probably how I would describe it. It's not one part of the wine is too out of sync with each other, which I think is very surprising considering what you've just said and how much has gone in there. I mean, it's great. Again, this is the Winemakers collection. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. Again,
yeah, absolutely.
It fits in well with the Red Miller, and I'm sure we'll do with the other ones as well, because there is a lot going on there. I mean, you've just said how much you put into it and almost how surprised you were at the outcome. But yeah, this is a great wine. I think this would be one to just enjoy on its own. I mean, you mentioned some food pairings, but it's really nice to explore and experience how much is going on there. Great.
No, it is. It's a really lovely wine, and really exciting. And I love the sort of texture and complexity that I get. It always makes me smile. Thoroughly enjoy it. Brilliant. We go on to wine number 3.
Sure.
Oh, absolutely. So this is our Balfour late harvest. So this is probably when I talked about Red Miller and I said we probably won't be able to make a red Pinot Meunier again, but we might be able to. With this, we'll never, ever, ever, ever be able to do it again. Hand on heart, I know we can't do this again. So these grapes came from one of our contract growers, and it's 100% Chardonnay. And they had this site. It's called Yokesport in Kent. It's a beautiful site on Kentish Ragstone, and they do a lot of contract growing. And we were lucky enough to buy some of their grapes in 2018. And they had this block of Chardonnay that was in its second year, so they weren't going to harvest it. It was going to sit there, and they were going to drop the crop at the end of harvest and harvest in 2019 for the first time. So they had no one lined up to buy it. No one hadn't even told any of the wineries that were in the area that they had it. It was just there. And then about 3/4 of the way through harvest, the vineyard manager there called me and said, "I've got this block of Chardonnay, and it's it's got botrytis. And I was like, oh, that's a shame, mate. It's not one of the ones we're buying from, is it? We're thinking, Christ, I don't want bloody botrytis in the winery. He's like, no, it's good rot, and it's not. It's currently unbought. And I was like, okay, well. So I popped over to see it, sort of mid-harvest, and went over, and it was genuine botrytis. About a 2.5 acre block. I don't know if you've ever been lucky enough to taste a botricized grapes, but it's the most bizarre thing in the world. It's sort of like a limey, marmaladey, weird flavor in your mouth, and when it's proper botrytis, a la Sauternes, it is phenomenal. And so I was like, well, that's quite interesting. And so the decision was made that they'd leave it and hang it, and we'd see what was there at the end of harvest. And so on the 5th of November, they picked it. So harvest had finished about 2 weeks before. They picked it and brought in nearly 2 tons of this box-sized Chardonnay.
Wow.
Yeah. And we put it into the press. We one of the big things with making dessert wines is that because you've got all that sugar in them, they eat up a lot of SO2, and so and you're using the SO2. So the idea is you've got a lot of sugar and you don't want it to ferment again, so you treat it with SO2 to keep it to stop it from re-fermenting. So what you really want to do is limit the amount of SO2 you add during winemaking, so that when it comes to the final bottling, you can make that addition. You can't have the level of SO2 can't go beyond a certain point. And so with that in mind, what we did, I wanted to macerate the grapes, because I wanted to, from that 2.5 tons, I was expecting maybe 500 litres, maybe 600 litres. So a very low extraction rate. And we knew it was going to be small. So what we did was we macerated them overnight. But to protect it from oxidation, I added something cryophobic yeast. So this is a yeast that dies when it gets cold. We mixed it up and threw it over the top of the grapes after they'd been loaded into the press. And then flipped the press upside down. Basically, what happened is the yeast started to ferment, and that caused a blanket of carbon dioxide across the top of the grapes, protecting it from the atmosphere, so keeping it fresh. And then when we came in first thing the next morning, we started the press off. What did we finish with? Just under 1,000 litres. And then we crash chilled it down to 4 degrees. So we killed off that yeast, racked it, and then inoculated it with a Sauternes yeast and fermented it in brand new French oak. And then this was born. There were quite a lot of hoops to jump through before it finally got to here, but not least putting it into bottles like this on a bottling line that doesn't have the change parts to fill bottles, a bit like that. But it was, it's just an awesome wine, and I know we'll never be able to make it again. And the best thing is, we made lots of it. Nearly 2,000 bottles of it. Every bottle's labeled, numbered, and once it's gone. But it's not going too quickly at the moment, and I'm very happy about it because I think it's going to improve and improve and improve. I haven't put down any of my own yet, and I really should do that.
Sounds like a very happy, almost accident. I mean, it's not something you're expecting, but you've been able to, have a lot of fun as well, I think, throughout that winemaking process. Is that you've done a lot there. It's a very complex wine to make and quite a unique wine for an English wine as well. I'm really surprised at how much depth there is, because it's probably quite tricky to create a sweeter wine in England that will have a good consistent body that won't be too sweet. It's all about balance with wine, and particularly with dessert wines or sweet wines, etc., because they are more complicated in our climate. But I like the fact it's not too pronounced in any way. You know, again, it's going back to this balance. It's quite soft, but it's really nice, fresh citrus. But then it's balanced out as well with the slightly sweetness of it, should we say? It's a very interesting English wine, this, and I think people should try and get some, because it doesn't sound like it's going to be around for long.
No, certainly not. I mean, it's flown out in the last sort of 12 months since it released, and there won't be much left, which is a shame. But truly, yeah, like you said, it was all about. Traditionally in England, if you're making a dessert wine, you're going to use something like Hattingly use Bacchus. Few people use things like Schornberger and the other one. There was a classic one, Seagriever. And yeah, so traditionally you use those sorts of varieties, and they're great. They make some amazing wines, but they don't tend to have much acid and much structure beyond the sweet and perfume aromatics. That's why it was quite exciting to get Chardonnay, ostracized Chardonnay, which is really cool. And it shows through phenomenally. And yeah, like I said, never get to do it again. And I'm okay with that. I'm at peace with it. I'll put my stock down and I'll keep it. And it's cool.
As we were saying, I mean, it's a good thing for a vineyard and a winery to have is a unique wine, and a lot of this falls in line with what you're saying, like the label designs and the other wines that you're doing. You know, these happy accidents have worked out really well for you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, none of us saw this wine coming 12 months, 2 years ago. Blimey, I've been around a while now. No one saw this coming in 2018. Didn't expect to see it at all. And yeah, I mean, we're really lucky, because obviously we need to be supported in some of these ridiculous ideas. And luckily Richard he's put a lot of faith into us. And so if we say we'd like to do this, he will more often than not say, okay, you can do that. With you know, there's a little bit of trepidation sometimes, especially when we're suggesting something ridiculous like, you know, red Pinot Meunier. But he's actually incredibly supportive of projects like that. And you know, we've got some new bits which are in tank at the moment for 2020. You know, got a few more wines that we want to produce again for the Winemakers collections in the future. And he's on board with most of them so far. So got a couple more to get over the line. No, it's good. He's quite supportive, and you couldn't do that. You couldn't do what we're doing without. And that's, I think, quite exciting. One of the big bonuses of working here.
Well, that's what you want, as we're saying, as a winemaker, you want the freedom to explore, to experiment, particularly if you're finding all these interesting elements that you get to then explore, because the winemaking process. Well, it's a process. It's constantly development of the grapes, of the juice, and the fact you get to tinker so much, I'm not surprised. You're pleased that he allows you to.
We're very lucky, and yeah, and Hush Heath is the perfect place for it. I mean, the equipment we've got is phenomenal, and the setup there is beautiful. It's very conducive to making interesting wines and to be a bit more with what we're doing. I think that's really lovely. And it's part of the core of Hush Heath, is the ability to be a bit different.